Awesome. Thanks for tuning in on Facebook Live and YouTube today. Appreciate you guys coming today too on a nice and gorgeous day outside. A couple fun little facts today we had. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but the first, yesterday morning I was going to go swimming and the moon was just perfect. You had that perfect view of the stars. There's no clouds in the sky. It wasn't like today. The first of possible 2 lunar landers are rocketing towards the moon right now. The first one launched yesterday. I think another one's coming later on, maybe early next week. So the Astrobotic robot caught on a ride on a brand new rocket, United Launch Alliance. It's pretty cool. All these private companies have been funded to try to be space companies. And so, it's like you think about like any major industry, like, Steve Jobs and the iPhone or all, these things start and you're like, you don't really pay attention to them. Then all of a sudden you're using it, And so what NASA figured out was they weren't very good at doing anything anymore. So they said, hey, we'll just pay a private business to do it. And so what they did was they put incentives out there. They said, hey, if you do these certain things, we'll give you money. But if you don't do them, you get nothing. And so a bunch of investors went in and started building rocket companies. And that's how, if you ever notice with SpaceX, they're getting ready to launch the next rocket for Intuitive, is they can launch that rocket up, and then it comes right back down and it lands. If you want to see a cool YouTube video, just think about how much drugs Elon Musk had to be taking when he decided that it was a good idea to launch a rocket up and land it back where it came down. I mean, think about that, right? That's crazy. And it works. But it's so smart because you're not throwing away the rocket, which is exactly how my grandparents would have thought, right? Well, you want to save everything. We don't want to throw it away, And so that's what they did. And so it's taken off. But it's pretty cool because all these private companies are now going to space. And so it would not be surprising in 10 or 15 years if there's some kind of colony on the moon and you could go there for vacation, which is going to be just nuts, right? Obviously going to space is dangerous and some people are going to die on the way there. But I mean, shoot, Boeing, poor Boeing this week with their, I don't know if you guys noticed, but we were very fortunate. Nobody was sitting in those seats. No, seriously, those 2 seats on the plane were empty. And if you've flown recently, every plane I've been on is full. And I think it was 24B and 24D or something. But both of those seats, basically, if you've been in those seats, I kept thinking about my little 6-year-old, like, Madeline, you got to keep your seatbelt on. Yeah, Madeline, you got to keep your seatbelt on. Next time we fly, it's going to be more intense. But hopefully they'll get that figured out. One interesting thing is anybody familiar with the country of Yemen? Anybody ever heard of this country before? Okay, so they have this group called and I'm going to pronounce it Houthis or whatever. And so since the Israel-Gaza thing blew up, they've started attacking merchant ships. So right now they've attacked at least 24 merchant marine vessels. Last week, if you noticed, they were attacking a vessel and the U.S. Navy came in and blew them up. Killed a bunch of people in those boats. And so what really matters here is if you look at Yemen, there's been a long-term conflict between basically Saudi Arabia and its friends versus Iran. And so it's interesting today because yesterday they reported that they had a deal to stop attacking U.S. ships. They're basically going to probably pay them a bribe to stop attacking ships. And so oil prices dropped $3 a barrel when I was writing Investment Insight as a price of that deal. Because if you ever look at the Suez Canal comes in right here, right? And all that oil flows through the Suez Canal to Europe. Well, now, or goes around. Now, because of the Red Sea, most of the shipping companies are saying, we're not going through there. And if you follow Christopher Columbus or any of the people in history, if you can't go through there, how are you going? Yeah, all the way around Africa, right? You have to go a long, long way. And so, if you know a little bit about Islam, which I'm not near you have the Sunnis, and you have the Shias. And so the Sunnis are the majority, and the Shias are the minority, and only one country really has a majority of Shia religion, and that's Iran. And so if you look at historically, Iran is basically, the Saudi Arabia people went in, we're just going to wipe out the Sunnis, which if you look at Islamic history, both religious sects have tried to wipe each other out for a long time, and they will continue to do so probably for my lifetime, unfortunately. But they're fighting over this. But what's interesting about this whole conflict is with Russia and Ukraine still fighting their war, Russia versus Ukraine, you're still seeing basically a situation where a lot of energy is having to come from the Middle East, and a lot of it's having to come from the United States. And so whenever this conflict, this Israeli conflict continues, and now if you noticed last night, Israel has now been attacking Hezbollah, which Hezbollah is right there in Lebanon. So now they went after Gaza, now they're going up north. And Hezbollah is backed by Iran. Well, that's a pretty good one. And so this conflict continues to go forward. But obviously for Saudi Arabia and Iran, anytime there's a conflict around oil, the prices do what? They go up. And so for them, even though it's inflationary for us, a little bit of conflict actually means a lot of money, right? Because they get to make a lot of money. Because most of the world right now is in a semi-recession. And so since most of the world's in a semi-recession, if these two countries go into an issue, it just continues to go on. But it looks like they have a deal. Now today, as we were sitting in here, oil prices are going back up. So maybe they don't have a deal. It's hard to make a deal with people that want to blow you up. It's not a great long-term plan. If you look at, it's very interesting. U.S. oil production, of course, hit a all-time record here in October. And so just another reason why the United States needs more pipelines. If you look at our country, we've got tons of oil here, and we're supplying a lot of the world. And if you look as an investor, do you want to invest in the Middle East or do you want to invest in the United States? Because no one's blowing up anything near us. This is pretty far away, right? And so that's something that does look to be going on. But you have this continual conflict between the Sunnis and the Shia, religion and oil all still being involved. But it looks like some of that's calming down. Of course, if Israel and Lebanon go back at it again, then we'll probably have more attacks. But Iran, of course, has armed the Houthis, or how do you say their name, and then Houthis. And then, sorry, I said it wrong again. And then also the Hezbollah. But an interesting fact is most U.S. soldiers are getting attacked because a lot of the people that the U.S. soldiers fought in Afghanistan are now mercenaries being paid for by Iran. And so if you look at the two most dangerous places for U.S. military to go, military forces, are Syria and Iraq. And right now, I was reading a report, and this may be inaccurate, but there's 40 to 50,000 soldiers staring down U.S. soldiers that the U.S. military fought in Afghanistan. So even though we left Afghanistan, Afghanistan just moved right next to U.S. military bases. So you didn't do much good, right? They just moved a little farther inland. And so now they're sitting all in this area. So it's a little bit of a powder keg. Obviously, if you're selling oil, you want there to be a powder keg. You just don't want it to explode. Kind of like if you're selling corn, you don't want drought, right? You don't want there to be a lot of rain, because if there's a lot of rain, there's a lot more corn. You get less for your corn. And so that's the same thing with oil. And so that continues to go on here. Now, the last fun fact I had for today, and I don't want to get into a political conversation, so please don't make me. But I have to talk about it because it's important. But I thought this irony is, if you remember, the state of Colorado, of course, used a law from the Civil War if you guys, I don't know if you guys ever listened to podcasts or stuff, but I was listening to one on Reconstruction here when I was running 2 weeks ago, and it was very interesting. But after the Civil War ended, the South they had an election. They sent all their people to the, so Lincoln had been killed, right? And then they had an election, and the South sent a bunch of people that were in the Confederacy to represent them in right after the Civil War was over. And they said, hey, we were in the Confederacy, but now we're in the Union, so we're back voting again. And so, of course, the military escorted them all out of the Capitol and refused to seat them. And then they passed all the Reconstruction laws. Well, during that Reconstruction, they passed a law that if you were involved in a sedition act against the United States, you could not run for office. And so Colorado found this old law from 1866, dusted it off, and they say that Trump can't be on their presidential ballot for this year. Now, what's interesting about it is, on February 8th, the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments on what's happening. Now, generally speaking, and obviously this year is an election year, every state sets their own election rules. If you're in Tennessee, you can vote early or you can go in. If you're in California, you all vote by mail now. Right? So every state sets their own laws. So what's going to be interesting about this is the Supreme Court historically doesn't like to get involved with how a state does their election. But the question too is, how do you take somebody off the ballot that hasn't been convicted of a crime? Right? Because, in America, you're not guilty till you're convicted. And he might be guilty. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm just saying, and then you also have this other thing, you're entitled to a speedy and fair trial. So if something happened 4 years ago, if I go out and shoot Neil, I hope they don't wait 4 years to come pick me up. I hope they come get me. Neil, you're dead, Neil, so you don't care, right? But anyway, hopefully, Mandy does. But anyway, the point is, and so the 17th Amendment, of course, is interesting because the 17th Amendment is what said that, so previous to the progressive era in U.S. politics, the actual our state assembly elected our senators. So you didn't get to vote in the senator, you would vote on your House member and your Senate member, and then the Senate would go ahead and say, hey, we really like this guy. Because the idea was that the federal government would spend less money if the state, give you a simple example. So let's talk about one of the things Tennessee's talking about doing. It's the Department of Education. So the Department of Education says that my kids must be educated in a specific way. My kids must have a certain type of food at their school. And they'll give Warren County school system 20% of the budget, but they get to decide what happens with the full 100% of the money. Do you understand the problem here? 1/5 the money comes from the feds, and they get 100% of what happens, which they say, no child left behind, which means they don't care if my kids really get A's. They want my kids to get C's, and they want my kids to go to school. So what matters the most, and if you ask my kids, what matters the most, it's perfect attendance. Now, I could take them to a university or the Federal Reserve and have a meeting with the Federal Reserve person that Aiden had today, and that wouldn't be as valuable as them sitting in school. You see the problem with that? It's not education. It's everybody's got to pass, and everybody's got to have their butt in school. And if you do that, the school gets more money. And, of course, our governor is talking about doing away with this right now, but he's got to come up with the other 20% because now that we got that money, we're addicted to it. Okay? So historically, before the 17th Amendment, your senator was appointed by your legislator, which meant that the Senate really cared what happened in the state because if you passed a law that that state didn't like, hey, we're getting rid of that senator. You understand the difference there? But what's interesting is, on this Trump case, is the 17th Amendment is where they said the Supreme Court has some authority in a lot of these local elections, to me. So this court case is going to be really interesting. Now, the next court case, of course, is there's something called Super Tuesday. This is a big day if you're in Tennessee, right? Because these states vote in the primary election. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Iowa, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Virginia all vote that day. And if you guys didn't know already, there's this guy named Jack Smith, and he wants his court case to start March 4th. You guys hear that? March 5th, everybody votes. March 4th, he wants to start his court case. What could happen, right? Anyway, going to be an interesting year. And so, obviously, the Supreme Court between February 8th and March 5th, they're going to say if he can be on the ballot. Well, if they say that Trump can be on the ballot in Colorado, then probably any state where the Democrat majority is in power, what are they going to do? They're going to take him off the ballot. Which means between today, or February 8th, and March 5th, the Republican Party has to get a new candidate within 30 days to 15 days. And remember, my dad's an election official in Warren County, and all those ballots got to be reprinted. And all the early voting. I mean, think about the mess. Right? So this year's going to be real interesting. I know this doesn't really involve a lot of the stuff that qualifies to money, but this will affect your money, obviously, what happens with all this stuff. The Republican convention starts July 15th. The Democratic convention starts August 19th. And thank God we get to vote November 5th. Because this will be over with, which I'll be happy about. Either way, I'll be up all night, but I'll be happy when it's over, especially on that weekend. But what's interesting is I've heard an interesting theory, which is, so they put Trump in jail, and then at the convention they pick the nominee. Because you think about it, historically, it used to be at the convention you'd pick the nominee. Well, now you kind of know ahead of time. Well, if he does go to jail, it'd be them. Yeah, John.
Isn't the big question is, what is an insurrection? and number two is, there are several states that are saying that they want the president off the ballot because of the insurrection at the southern border. So we could have half the group voting this and half voting that. Who knows?
Well, you're right. And another thing, too, that Biden even said is if Trump was off the ballot, he didn't want to run. And so the last thing I was going to say is if Trump gets off the ballot here in February or March, or he goes to jail, whatever, it's very possible that at the convention we're going to have two new candidates running for president that aren't even in the picture right now. You know, and so actually, and the funny thing about it is, I would say a majority of Americans would probably agree with that. Like you said, Dean, I'm not picking on anybody here, not trying to make any mad, but you look at it and say that's a very good chance, you know, and maybe that's what needs to happen. I don't know, but the point is all this stuff's very interesting because obviously, from investment standpoint, the thing that the markets love the most about both Donald Trump and Joe Biden is they know what to expect. If you get Joe Biden reelected, you've already seen what the last 4 years have looked like. So what would you expect the next 4 years to look like? Worse. Well, the same. If you look at Donald Trump and you look at the 4 years he was elected, you're going to expect the same thing. And so at the end of the day, the markets love certainty more than politics. They want to just know what the deal is. That's all they care about. You know, the number one problem we've had for the last 2 years is the Federal Reserve has been very aggressive out of nowhere. They caused a lot of uncertainty. And so the number one thing as investors is really certainty. Now, the last thing, and we're going to talk about this on a podcast today. So if you guys aren't already, look at our YouTube channel, like it, and then our Facebook page. But we're doing a podcast every Thursday now. But we've seen a big uptick in scams targeting your money. We actually got a pretty convincing one. I got two convincing ones last week. One was somebody had created an email that looked exactly like Hayden Profit, and they sent it to my wife saying to update where his paycheck goes to a new thing. And they actually talked like Hayden. It actually sounded like him in an email. I don't know if Hayden saw that or not. Maybe it was Hayden. I don't know. He was hunting, so I'm just kidding. They knew he was hunting, so hunting ducks. And he didn't bring us any back. Can you believe that? It's ridiculous. And then the second one was we had a customer who they had hacked his email. It had his name in the email address that he normally uses, but they had changed it from Yahoo to a different provider, and they had requested money out of accounts. And it was clearly not a normal thing, but we're seeing a lot more financial hack. A couple things also remembering too is if it's too good to be true, if someone tells you something that's too good to be true, it probably isn't. One of the most common things we've been seeing is wire transfers to buy cyber currencies. The number one cause of theft right now for banks is there, and they send the money to countries that are not part of our financial system with wires. Okay, we had a big one this year or last year where a customer almost lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, and they were very convincing. They had created a website that looked real. They had created a bunch of stuff that was complex, and if you didn't look at little details in it, you would think it's real. It was very legitimate looking. They had even found investments, and I tracked them, and they actually made the amount of money they said. It looked legit. It just wasn't real. And then afterwards, the person tried to blackmail the other person, so so you knew it wasn't legitimate. It went really bad. So be careful. If you see a strange email or contact from anyone, another thing that if you're also familiar with is artificial intelligence. As I'm recording this video, there are bots right now that are going to be doing what? Capture my voice, steal my voice. So if you get some weird phone call from a number that sounds like me, it's probably coming. It's not from me. And so one of the things that if you need money out of your accounts here, hey, be old-fashioned. Give us a phone call because we're going to call you. I'm not going to just take an email or a text message. You need to know. And for wires, you're going to have to come in and sign them. I'm going to make sure you're really who you are. And if you're sending them to the Industrial Bank of China, I'm not sending them. Okay? I'm not doing it. I will quit. You will find someone else. I'm not doing that on my insurance. And so that's one thing that we're seeing a huge uptick in scams. And I really, really mean this. I mean, we are seeing something almost every day. And I mean, I'm getting about 200 emails a day to try to hack our office email here because I'm the administrator. And they look legitimate. But and the spam filters don't catch them. So they're sophisticated stuff that's going on here. So
These emails are coming straight to our inbox. They're not just coming straight to the spam.
Yeah.
They're going straight to. So it's a whole different level of scamming.
yeah, so it's here. It's coming, and the artificial intelligence stuff will be even more pronounced because remember, if they can copy your voice, that means they can call you. And we've already had a scam event where somebody programmed the cell phone number. So if you ever look at our phones, you get a phone call from 474-2130, and you get a phone call from 728-2130. So Christina's calling for Investment Insight. That number's programmed. That's not actually the number on her phone. So I can actually program whatever number that shows in the caller ID, which means if I can do it, who else can do it too? A scammer. And so that means if they know your cell phone number, they could call my cell phone, they could call the office, and it's going to look like your number. And if they have your voice print and they're requesting money, you understand where this is going? This is the new kind of theft that is coming. And so, so what we're doing at the office is we've got some security measures in place that may be a little bit more pain in the butt, but I'm telling you, that's why we're doing it, is to make sure that can't happen. So I wanted to go over tax changes and then also 2024 outlook. And then obviously, forgot the disclaimer. Investments as educated, especially do our best to provide information. Please seek out competent legal and financial advice and tax advice for your current situation before you make a decision. So anyway, slow that down and you can listen to it. And then anyway, so let's go over some of the tax changes. Standard deduction. So if you guys are aware, the standard deduction is going to go up to $14,600 this year from $13,850. So that's $29,200 for a joint thing. Now that's now remember why this election also matters so much is the standard deduction is going to go away, and we're going to go back to a smaller standard deduction with a personal exemption. You guys remember when Donald Trump ran for office? He said you could file your taxes with a postcard. Well, he did kind of try to keep that promise because most people don't itemize anymore. Most people just take the standard deduction. And that means you're doing the short form versus the long form. Unfortunately, the short form is still like, long. But that is a promise he did try to keep. The 10% bracket is $0 to $23,000. Now what that means, of course, is if you're married and you guys make together $52,000 or less, you're going to be paying 0 to 10% taxes on all your money. So your tax rate is basically nothing, which is pretty neat. The 12% tax bracket, this is for joint, by the way. So the magic number for this year, as I call it, is $123,500. If you make $1 or if you make $123,500 in gross income, that means all your income is going to be taxed at either 0, 10, or 12%. Or basically, you're not going to pay much taxes. So a lot of times when we do Roth conversions, if your income is $100,000 and you convert $23,000 to a Roth, that makes a lot of sense because you're going from at a low rate. Because remember, in 2026, all these brackets go what? Up. All the deductions go down, and all the taxes go up. It's always funny. People are like, "Well, we're gonna kick Trump off the ballot in Colorado." Wait a minute. What does that have to do with my life? The tax thing is what affects my life. That's what really matters. But all the news media loves covering other stuff. But I want to care about what matters to you guys. What matters your money? Okay. Yeah.
The tax expiration at 26, is
Yeah.
that the tax cut that Trump implemented in his administration?
Yes.
So it expires at 26,
Yep.
25,
26.
26.
So you think about the timing of that. You got 24 election. 25, they won't do anything. They're just going to whatever. 26, you have the midterms. And they'll be arguing the midterms, do we raise taxes or not? In 2012, all the Bush tax cuts expired. So when President Obama won re-election, if you guys remember famously, John Boehner and Obama got into it, and they both cussed each other out and flipped each other off and walked away. Then Joe Biden called Mitch McConnell, who was not in the lead, he was the minority leader, and they cut a deal, which is why Obama famously did not support Biden for election. When Clinton got the support the first time, because he was still mad that they didn't get rid of all the Bush tax cuts. But historically, Joe Biden is the one that locked in 70% of George W. Bush's tax cuts.
This will never happen, but what's your opinion of a flat tax?
Oh, it'd be great, but it's never going to happen. The 22% bracket. Obviously, the best thing about a flat tax is you don't need as many financial people because there's not as much planning. So it's never going to happen. all the accounts would go away. I mean, come on, guys. They need jobs. So 24% tax. It's also easy. Why would we want to do something easy and efficient? That doesn't make sense. Now what, 50, 38, 300, 32%, 38, 3, 901, 487, 450, 35, 487, 450 to 730, one. And the top tax bracket in the United States at 37% is $731,201. Okay. So the handwriting is terrible. I do apologize. But those are the new brackets for this year. Now, on 401ks, you can put $23,000 in this year. The catch-up is $7,500. Simples, without catch-up, $16,000. The max you can put in between your employer and yourself is $69,000 per employee. A lot of small business owners don't realize if they did a 401k that they could put $69,000 a year in as long as they'll match their employees higher than normal. So would you rather give the money to the government or would you rather give the money to yourself? If you're in a small business, it's a huge advantage of doing it that way. Oddly enough, I always love 401ks because OJ still has his 401k. So the thing is, I always tell people this, is if OJ can keep his 401k with all the stuff that he allegedly did and was convicted of, then your 401k is probably pretty safe if you get sued. You know, just saying. Now, your wife has to die. That is the one negative on that one, but that's how it is. Highly compensated employee, $155,000. So what that means is if you make $155,000 a year or more, you're considered highly compensated, and there's discrimination testing. Key employee is $220,000. HSAs, you can put up to $8,300 now per family. And Social Security maxes out at $168,600. I always remember when I became self-employed, my Social Security would max out at $100,000, and then every year they keep raising it. So when they say they don't raise Social Security taxes, that's untrue, because every year more and more income captures underneath the Social Security tax bracket on that end. So these are some of the brackets on this end. Capital gains. Now, one thing people have to be careful with, if you sell property, if you sell a business, if you're selling an asset, you may have a year where you have higher taxes than normal. And I've just had this conversation with 10 people. There's a new law. Does everybody got this kind of down? Hopefully. It's gone. I've not checked the number. I should check the number for today, but I had a phone call about it this morning. If you made over $202,000 as a married couple last year, there's an extra Medicare tax. So as an individual, if you make over $101,000 last year, there's an extra Medicare tax of $300 to $500 a person a month. You guys understand? So they put in a special tax that they didn't really pay attention to, is if your income goes $1 over $101,000 or $202,000, that means you got to pay an extra Medicare premium. Now, why that matters, of course, is if you were to sell a property or you were to sell something big this year, that count towards that Medicare premium. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you normally made $80,000 a year, but you're like, you know what? Or let's just say I'm making $80,000 a year retired. I'm like, I'm tired of having my farm, I'm going to sell it. So I take the 400 acres, well, I got 160, and I sell the land with my trust, and I sell it for $1.6 million. Okay? Because I inherited that in my trust via my grandmother in 2006. I only get to take off what I inherited it for, right? So in 2006, farmland out at my farm was selling for probably $2,000 or $3,000 an acre. So my basis on this land at $2,000 an acre is $320,000 bucks. You guys understand that? $1.6 million sell it for, basis $320,000. So I owe taxes on the what? The difference, yeah. So $1,280,000 in income that year. So even though I only made $80,000, my taxable income is effectively what? $1,360,000. And so Medicare, even though it's a one-off, they're going to charge me that extra premium that year and the next couple of years because they see that big year and they're going to what? Want that extra money. And so that's one thing to be careful with when you're looking at Medicare is this is another little hidden tax. If you sell an asset, if you sell a big piece of property, if you sell a business, if you have a year where you have a weird amount of income, you might want to look at some stuff a little differently because that extra Medicare premium. I mean, you're talking about, if it's a married couple, you're talking about $12,000 a year in extra losses because they're going to charge you. They don't call it a tax. They just charge you more for Medicare, which is also a tax because they're going to make you pay some extra money for Medicare. So that's a new provision kind of snuck in there. It also applies to tax-free bond interest. So if you have tax-free municipal bonds or you have Roth IRA distributions, I believe that counts. I've not checked in the Roth, but I know tax-free does. So like, hey, I put my money in Roth. It's all tax-free forever. Well, yes, but now your Medicare costs more. See, there's a weird thing that happened maybe 10 years ago, and a customer noticed it, and I didn't think anything of it. All of a sudden, they started reporting tax-free bond interest on your tax return. Like, why are you reporting tax-free money? It's tax-free. Well, now we know why. Because they could charge you more on Medicare. Big deal if you sell some property. Big deal if you do some stuff. But the crazy part is, if you go $1 over, you pay the full amount. If I'm not mistaken. If you go $1 under, you don't. So remember, if you give money out of an IRA to charity as part of your RMD, it is not considered taxable income. So theoretically, you could give $1 to charity and avoid a $6,000 a year per person Medicare charge. $1 could save you 12 grand. Now, normally our tax code is progressive. This is not progressive. This is regressive. And so, but that is a new Medicare tax. Now, after this election, if Joe Biden wins, he's not going to run again. So what do you think the odds are they do more of this stuff? Pretty high. If Donald Trump wins and the Democrats are in power and they know he's going to be president, what's the odds they pass that this year before Christmas? Pretty high. So if you're ever going to see some changes to Medicare and Social Security while they're talking about Colorado, this is the year to do it. Right? Because remember, it's like a magician. They're showing you one thing, but you need to be looking at what? That's why you never go to the House of Cards in Nashville with my wife. Because we're there, it's late at night, and they're doing these tricks. And she's looking at the people in the back room. They're signaling them. And so she starts saying, he's signaling them! He's signaling! I'm like, shut up, we're going to get kicked out of here. I don't want to be, don't calm down. They're cheating. I'm like, okay, wait, you're here. They're not really magicians. Like, there's no real magic here. This is a setup. That's what they're doing, and that's what they're doing here right now with your money. Is they're talking about Colorado, they're talking about this, but what do they really do? Something like this. Expect more of this, and we got a deficit, so someone's got to pay for it, and people with no money can't pay for it. So that's how it goes. So capital gains. So if your taxable income, so this is after your deductions. After your deductions, not your gross, after your deductions, 0% on long term at $94,050, 15%, $94,050 to $250. One of my favorite laws they passed like this too was in 2010. Remember 2010, if you made $250,000 a year, you were considered to be rich. So to pay for the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, depending upon which political party you're in, they passed an extra 3.8% capital gains tax if you made $1 over $250. Again, regressive, not progressive. But they never indexed it for inflation. So now we're looking at this 14 years later, and it's still at $250. Hasn't moved. And the reason why it can't move is there's this process called reconciliation. You guys ever heard of that? I really don't enjoy attorneys. The main reason why is because stuff like this. So in our system in Congress, you can pass a law But if you add to the deficit, it's only good for 8 years. So when Donald Trump was president, he wanted to get rid of that capital gains tax. But if he got rid of it, then Obamacare wouldn't be paid for anymore. Which means the deficit would go up. Which means he couldn't what? Couldn't cut it. It's always funny. Remember Obama said, we're not going to raise taxes to pay for, you're not going to raise taxes on you to pay for your health care? Well, they did. And they actually argued in the Supreme Court that Obamacare was a tax law. So they're raising that 3.8% tax, it could be legal. And the Supreme Court rightly said, well, you know what? It is a tax increase. That's okay. But it's funny when they campaign, they're like, we're not raising taxes. Then they go to the Supreme Court. Yeah, we're raising taxes. I got to love the way people speak. So 18.8% is 250 to 583, 750. Same deal, right? You go $1 in income below 250.01, you're at the 15% rate. You go $1 above, it's 18.8. Big deal. The next one's a 23.8% rate, which is if you make $583,750 or above, you're at 23.8%. Okay, now this other one is the QBID deduction. I really like this one. Unfortunately, financial advisors are not allowed to get it, or CPAs, so it sucks. But the Qualified Business Interest Deduction, or investment, or I don't know, actually I know what the I stands for, so I'm just making stuff up. The QBID, what does it stand for, Hayden?
Qualified business
Okay,
income deduction.
sorry, Hayden, that's good. Qualified Business Income Deduction. So this deduction right here means that if you're self-employed and you're not an engineer, remember? Self-employed and you're not a engineer, and you make less than $383,900 or $191,950, 20% of your income is not subject to taxation. Oddly enough, it actually encourages people to get divorced. Because if you have a business, you know, like my wife and I work here together, so I can say, okay, Susie, I'm going to pay you this much money so we can write it off on our taxes. That's $40,000 you don't have to pay taxes on. And the rest goes on one person's return. And so a lot of people don't get married because of this law. Because if you can move money around between your spouses, you don't have to pay taxes on 20% of it. Now, if you're an engineer, it's unlimited. So an engineer can make $15 million a year, and 20% of their income is not taxed. Because they were given an exception. They must have had somebody, must have been in engineering school that wrote the law, right? Like, I'm going to leave Congress, I'm going to be an engineer, we're going to make this work out. I'm kind of surprised Jacobs in Tullahoma hasn't turned into like one company, calling an engineering company, and said, hey, we're just an LLC. Forget this corporation thing, because then 20% of their income wouldn't be taxed, because they wouldn't be a corporation. So that's there. You can give away $18,000 a year. No questions asked. Anybody you want? Except for me. Can't give money to me. It's illegal. But anybody else? That's something that is there. Now, what's oddly enough, I didn't realize this till yesterday, is if your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, see, I can give away as much money to my spouse as I want. I can give away everything. And it's legal. That's how, if you guys remember, when they heard the argument on LGBT marriage, they said it was discrimination. And they're right, because if two guys are living together, they can't move money back and forth. But if they're married, they could. That was the main Supreme Court argument. It was about money. All the legal arguments come back to money. So, but if your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, you can only give $185,000 to them. Now, what do you want to bet? I've never seen this before. Been doing this for a while. What do you want to bet they use this argument someday to say that anybody married to a U.S. citizen becomes a citizen automatically? What do you want to bet that happens? Because that would be, in effect, discrimination. And I've never seen this ever mentioned before on a tax sheet. So I wonder if they snuck that law in at Christmas. And maybe I just don't read well enough, but that's just something that's very interesting. $185,000. But there's no accidents, right? So, anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay. So, inheritance tax. Under the current law, you can pass $13,610,000 or $27,220,000 to your heirs tax-free. Not for IRAs, just after-tax money. Now, actually, President Biden put this in effect back when he was vice president. He said in the law that you could give away $13,610,000 a year as well. Now, why this matters so much is all of these provisions expire in 2026. Close. Yeah. So right now, if you can give away the money before the law changes, if you're over some of these levels and the numbers go down, you would have already what? Gotten out of it. This is important. Because if they go back to the old rule, see right now, if I'm married, I get $13 million if it's in my name, I get $13 million if it's in Susie's name. Doesn't matter. The only caveat is 9 months after my wife's or mine death, you have to file a form claiming the deduction. If you don't claim the deduction, you don't get it. You guys understand? You don't get it automatically. You have to file the form. Now, this doesn't seem to matter much because everybody, these are big numbers, blah, 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 blah. But a lot of people have talked about lowering the inheritance tax threshold back to $3 million. Or even lower. When my grandma died, we were worried because they hadn't changed, until Bush was elected, they hadn't changed the inheritance tax from $550 since the Spanish-American War. So they didn't index it for inflation. So they paid for the Spanish-American War by taxing the rich people when they died. That's what they said, right? And they never indexed it for inflation. So in 2000, it was still $550. Well, in 1890, $550,000 is a lot more money than it is in 2000. Okay? And so one of the things that they would do under the law is automatically would go back to how it was before, which probably, if you listen to Jonathan's video, is probably going to be $7 million. That's for a couple. That's per person. So what a lot of people would do in the old days, which is 2010 before, is they would put half their money in their name and half their money in their spouse's name, so you got a double deduction. That old law comes back into effect in 2 years. However, under the current law, if you see the election going squirrely, you could go ahead and move your money into a trust before the law changes. Because one of the greatest things about American law is if it wasn't illegal when you did it, it wasn't illegal. Now that's something I didn't realize this till recently. I was talking to a customer that as an executive at a German company. But in Germany, it's not legal unless the law says you can do it. And that's true in Spain. So any state or any country that was settled by Spanish, Germans, or French, it's not legal until you say you can do it. But what you got to love about England is, hey, it's not illegal if you didn't say I couldn't do it. So back to the Garden of Eden, right? God says, don't touch that apple. If God didn't say don't touch that apple, that's the law system. And that's the difference between in Western Europe, our legal systems divide between those two areas. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you can't eat that one. Yeah. You're getting my definition right better, Cheryl. So that's the big law changes. But one thing that the current law does allow is this year you can give some of your $13 million away to a trust, to a family member before you die. And so if the laws change and they lower the thresholds back, because you just think about this, right? You guys remember, of course I wasn't alive, but there was an election with, it was a senator from Arizona ran against Johnson. I can't remember his name. Anyway. Huh? Yeah. Barry Goldwater ran against Lyndon B. Johnson, right? And Goldwater got crushed. Well, when he got crushed in the election, all the House and Senate went hardcore Democratic Party. So most of the laws that were passed in that era were passed when there was strong majorities. Well, if they don't allow candidates on a ballot, a lot of the people won't show up, which means you'll see the House of Representatives really flip a different direction. And so a lot of these law changes could go into effect if the election goes a certain way. And so some of the things you can do ahead of time is you can plan some of this out. Here we are in January. Election's not till November. But we're going to wake up, it's going to be November. And so there's some things you can do now to fix some of these issues, obviously. So there's something to think about. You have any questions about this? Because I talked a lot today. Okay. So, let's see how much more I got left. A lot. Okay. So, obviously, when we look at 2024, what is the outlook for investors? Also, Neil, I want to thank you for fixing the whiteboard. I don't have to harass Hayden as much anymore, but I still wanted to do it now, so thank you for fixing it, Hayden. So, anyway, Neil's first day, he fixed our whiteboard, which is really nice. Because I'd be harassing Hayden the whole meeting for me moving. You see, it's not moving anymore. It's pretty nice. Okay, so if you look at 2024, we look at our outlook. It's very interesting because in 2022, it's very hard to say what's going to happen, right? 2022, not very many people saw Russia invade Ukraine. Because you look at it like, it doesn't really benefit Russia from our perspective to invade Ukraine. From the way we look at life, why would anybody do that? But we only see what? Our perspective. Okay, so that was hard to predict. And that caused a lot of inflation, right? That caused a lot of trouble. In 2020, when Joe Biden was elected, very, very few people thought the oil production would go up in the United States. Did you guys know that? Oil production, when Joe Biden was elected, was 11 million barrels a day. It's now, in October of last year, it was 13,248,000 barrels a day. Wait a minute, I thought we're going all electric. In 1969, a few people probably thought we wouldn't go back to the moon after 1972 until hopefully this week or next week. Right? Because we were going to the moon all the time. And the last time the United States has been to the moon was 1972 in December. And we're going back now. So we look at expectations for this year. The hardest thing with expectations it's hard to meet expectations. Everybody's expecting interest rate cuts. Which means if they don't happen, it's going to be a really rough year for investors. Right? Because if rates don't go down, it's bad news. The Federal Reserve, Hayden actually got to hear one of them speak this morning, which he should have told me because I would have gone. So not that I'm hurt or anything. Hayden, just kidding. Soft landing. They're saying, hey, we're going to have a soft landing. Everything is going to be perfect. Oof. I don't think I'd be saying that kind of stuff. If you're a Republican, you think Donald Trump's going to be president. If you're a Democrat, you probably think Joe Biden's going to be president. The Dodgers are supposed to win the World Series. I sure hope they don't. Sorry, Ori. San Francisco has the best odds to win the Super Bowl. Let's see if they do. Right? They're the odds-on favorite. And so predictions really are very, very hard to beat. Now, I'll tell you a couple of predictions that I like for long-term investors, which is what I am, is I think U.S. companies will find a way to make money, whether Joe Biden's president or whether Donald Trump's president. If you don't believe that, look at oil production. When Bush was invading Iraq, U.S. oil production was like 4.6 million barrels a day. And now Joe Biden's president is 13 million barrels a day. Did Biden do that? Did George W. Bush do that? No. Harold Hamm and a bunch of guys got together and said, we want to make some money. Oil's expensive. I can find a cheaper way to do it. We want to get rich. Don't ever diminish the capitalistic spirit of America. You know, the reason why, and I always go back to the story, you know, King Ferdinand and Isabella, the reason why they paid Columbus, they gave him money to go west, is they just reconquered Spain. I think it was 9 or 11 days earlier. And as soon as they reconquered Spain, they kicked all the Moors out of Spain. They said, hey, Columbus, why don't you find a way to go? He comes to him and says, hey, I bet I can go straight instead of going around Africa to get to Asia. Okay, we'll take a flyer on that. And he comes up on America and calls everybody Indians, right? Because he thought he's in India. It wasn't in India. And so that's a corporation, because remember the deal that Isabella and Ferdinand did said you could half everything you find. So as soon as they found out how much he found, what did they do? They put him in chains and they threw him in jail. Right? First thing the government does, you get a bunch of money, they're going to go lock you up, right? They want to get your tax money. You know, it's always funny, the Mayflower, when I was reading, you know, like, hey, the Pilgrims came for religious freedom. But the best surviving document we have is the Mayflower Compact. You know what the Mayflower Compact is? It's a contract of how we're going to split the money when we get there. They weren't deciding how Corinthians was read. They were deciding what? How are we going to split the money? Because we're going to get rich. Because nobody paid the money for the ships if they didn't think they were going to get a return. That's just the truth, right? Either better or worse. Okay, obviously, current elected officials, what is their job? How many people are going to run on increasing your Medicare taxes this year? Right? Everybody loved that, right? I'm paying more for Medicare. Yes. Is anybody going to say that? No, they want the economy to look good for the election. Because if the economy is looking good the day you vote, you're probably going to vote for who? Them, yeah. Whoever's in office. If it's a Republican or a Democrat, right? Because, you know, look, what have our representatives done for you? Nothing. Really? Not much? They didn't come to work for you today. You had to come to work. But if you feel good when you vote, you tend to vote. It's always funny because, like, there's actually some statistics. If it's a sunny day, the party in power tends to win. If it's if it's a rainy, nasty day, people that are motivated are more motivated to vote, and they go vote. It's crazy, just all the stuff you can play around with. So you're like, what's the weather going to be like? Because that can determine who wins. Wait a minute. You mean Colorado doesn't determine who wins? No, if it's like this, people aren't coming out, you know, unless they're really motivated. Obviously, when elections are over, we tend to get a bump. Because whatever party wins, the party that's in the minority typically gives them 1 year to spend whatever they want to spend within reason. You guys remember this when Joe Biden was first in office is when he spent all the money, right? And ever since then, Republicans have been in Congress, so what did they stop doing? They're not letting them spend as much money. When Donald Trump won his first year in office, he passed all these tax law changes. And then after that, what did he do? He was on Twitter, right? And then you got Obama, when he was in office, he got the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, passed, and he got the financial reform law passed, all in his first 2 years in office. Then what did he do after that? He played basketball and golf, right? He was always at the golf course. Yeah, he built houses himself. And then you got George W. Bush. When he was elected, he got all his tax cuts passed. And then after that, we went to war. And everybody was protesting. You know, but that's basically what presidents do. They get 1 year. So whoever wins, and that's why we'll do our election investment insight, like who's going to win the election? What's the market saying? Because the market will give us a tendency, because if you know that Biden's going to win, you're going to love solar companies because they're going to get more money. And they're going to make more money. Right? If you know Donald Trump's going to win, you're going to love Raytheon because they're probably going to buy more missiles. Right? Well, right now, I mean, Raytheon loves both of them because the longer the war goes on, the more missiles people are buying. right? You think about if you're Houthis, how do you say it? Houthis. Yeah. Sorry. And so they, I bet you every country that they were firing missiles all the way into the Indian Ocean. Now you know what that tells me if I'm a defense contractor? That's a commercial. These crazy psychos can fire missiles all the way to the Indian Ocean. You need a Patriot missile defense system. Right? Nothing like shooting down a $2,000 missile with a $100 million missile. It's fantastic, right? I mean, like right now, we're doing that in Ukraine. You know that? We've got that Patriot missile system. I think it's like $2 or $3 million a missile. They're flying a little drone. You get it at Walmart. Blow it up. Pretty stupid, right? Like, that's like, maybe get like a rifle. I'm pretty sure I'm not a great shot, but I can do circle, and I can get it. So and so that's what you're looking at. So it's a big commercial, and so whoever wins the election is going to make money because nobody spends $4 billion on an election just for fun, right? I mean, all these people are spending money on the election because they want to control the narrative. They want to control what's going on. So that's they can make money. It's an investment. And so obviously, well, we're a little bit over, so let's go over this quickly. At the end of 2023, you can say a few things. Interest rates on the 10-year Treasury were 5% in October. They've dropped down to in the upper threes. Now they're back up to about 4%. So it's pretty clear the market's already priced in 4 rate cuts this year. The economy does appear to be slowing down. If you look at, this is just anecdotal evidence, but if you drive by car lots, what do you see a lot of now? A lot of cars. If you look at homes, they're not selling very fast. If you look at restaurants, they're busy, but they're not full. They're still busy though. And so if you look at flights, I just looked at it yesterday. So last year for spring break, I went to California with my kids because it was $750 to fly a child on Southwest to Fort Lauderdale. And it was $250 to fly them to California. I looked at the Fort Lauderdale prices yesterday. It was back to $234 to fly to Fort Lauderdale, which tells you flights have what? They've dropped off. And that's true. I booked some air travel, and it's about half of what I expected it to be. So that means things have gone back to normal on a lot of that traveling stuff. And so obviously the good things are, we all know as an investor, we know that they're going to want the election to look good. I give you some great examples. I'm not trying to pick on Joe Biden and Donald Trump the whole time, but one funny thing is, what did Joe Biden just approve? He did 3 major things that you would never think he would do back in 2020. Anybody know? Well, the first one was he started building the border wall again in Texas. Wait a minute. We don't have walls in our country. Right? I think that's a quote. The second thing that he did was he approved offshore oil drilling in the Atlantic. The third thing that he did is there's this little country called Guyana, which is going to produce 1,200,000 barrels a day. He sent the U.S. military in to protect them from Venezuela. Because if you can't get that oil from the Red Sea, you can definitely get it from the Caribbean. Now, the sad part is it's too bad politicians don't just do all the right things when they're not running. But the good thing about running for our election, and it's very good for us, is all the politicians want things to be as good as possible on election day. So now they start working for you because they want to maintain their power. Now, next year, different story. But this year, but it is funny, right? Because if you listen to TV shows, you listen to stuff, those are stories they're not talking about. But those are really the facts of what you're looking at. It's, another great example is, so Venezuela, right? Biden's improved relationship with Venezuela. What does Venezuela sell the most of? What kind? Yeah, which is the main product for diesel. And guess what? Everything you ate on today was sitting on at one point. a diesel truck. And by the way, Venezuelans, if you look at the last voting cycle in Florida, Venezuelans vote Republican. Other groups do not. Guess who's getting deported back to Venezuela? Venezuelans. Now, it doesn't matter if you look at Donald Trump, he did the same thing. Who did he not want to come into America? And I'm not picking on one party. They're both doing it. The point is, there may be a political motivation. But the best thing for us for this year in investments is they want the economy looking really good come November. Because you typically get reelected if it does. You know, you could make a strong argument that if COVID didn't happen, Donald Trump's probably president. You know? You can make a strong argument. You could make a strong argument that if Iran didn't fall to Khomeini in '79, you never see Ronald Reagan president of the United States. Jimmy Carter wins re-election. Same kind of concept. George H.W. Bush, there was a little recession right before the election, and then Bill Clinton, what? Snuck in and won. So that's the good thing for investors is they're going to do whatever it takes to try to make the economy look good, which means they're going to try to promote business, which is good this year. Do you have any questions about anything?
When's the next Fed meeting for raising rates possibly?
Great question. I don't know. It should be, I believe they meet, I know they meet in March. And they should meet probably, I think around the 18th or 20th of January, I thought. But they normally meet a bunch early in the year, then they take the summers off. Just kidding. They meet in July.
You know the market is around that time.
What is it?
January 30th and 31st.
Okay. Well, right now, of course, the Federal Reserve has been saying they want interest rates that things are good. They want interest rates to go down a little bit. On Sunday, there's something called the Fed asset sheet. Okay, so not to get on a long story on this, but the way the Federal Reserve brought down mortgage rates and caused housing to go up so much was they started buying or giving loans to people for houses through Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So they didn't do it directly, but they did it through multiple intermediaries. So like my loan on my house is 2.75% interest because the federal government wanted to subsidize me on my house. Now, we can go into logic if that's smart business. I don't think it is. But what the Fed has been doing is when people pay off their house, instead of letting you get a new loan with them, they take their money back and they burn it. And so that is something they're talking about stopping. What are you going to say, John?
My big question is, the prices have gone up in the last year or two. How many times have you seen McDonald's drop the price of their hamburgers? The prices aren't going to change.
Yeah.
People still going to have pain at the pump, and the cost of oil may go down a little bit, but it goes right back up.
Well, that is the question. And so when you look at the bottom line is between Trump and Biden, because Trump did it too, 30%, we increased our money supply by 30% for the whole country. So unless you burn 30% of the money, those prices don't go back down. And the problem is the rest of the world did it too. China did it, Europeans did it, everybody did it at the same time because they're like, we're going to fix COVID by printing money. Well, all you do when you print money is you make everybody poor. Just look at the Roman Empire. You could actually get silver coins from every year, and they go from like this big to like that big. And you can actually track them. I need to get them. I would love to have like a few of them, like just replicas. I don't know what they probably cost millions of dollars for originals, but just some replicas that show you like how it works. And so anytime you have inflation, you don't have like usually deflation. What you have is a new baseline. A new house, you know, like when I moved to Manchester, a basic house was 80 to 100 grand. Now that house is 250. Guess what it's going to be? 250. And so that is the problem. But the hard part is, does anybody remember when they vote? That's all that matters. You know, I mean, if you want to ask my opinion, based on both of the ways that both of them have spent money, I don't think they should be running because I wouldn't be proud of inflation. I would be proud of, giving all this money away and having nothing to show for it. I mean, if we had a whole new interstate system and they'd spent $3 or $4 trillion, I'd feel pretty good about that. But you come to Tennessee, right? We get all these more people, and we still have the same amount of roads. I can't imagine why I'm going to be in traffic on Wednesday tomorrow, and I'm leaving at 5 a.m., for a 7 a.m. appointment.
How can we allow a person such as the president, Supreme Court's been involved, give away $400 billion? I mean, he's given away $400 billion. And then also, obviously that's adding to the deficit.
You mean for the student loans? Okay, so the student loan provision, which is in there, when 9/11 happened, Congress voted a law where they gave President Bush the ability to forgive students in active war zones the right to forgive debt. Off that law, they gave the president the ability to forgive soldiers' debts. And so that same law, because it's on the books. Now they've manipulated. There's a senator from Wisconsin who said, or is either Wisconsin or is either I forget the senator from Wisconsin and Scott from Florida. They said every law should expire every 6 years. Because the thing is that the law is not relevant anymore. We don't need it. And if it is, we'll pass the same law. Well, you think about it, it's really smart because they're using 9/11 to forgive people that work at Starbucks loans. No offense, but if you weren't near a roadside bomb or you didn't get near somebody shooting at you, it's not the same thing. Like I've never been shot at by anybody, surprisingly. And so the thing is no one's ever shot at me. And so I don't, I'm paying for my loans. I'm just going to go to work. Somebody that's right now, think about all those U.S. soldiers, they're getting ready to deploy the Tennessee National Guard to Iraq. Okay? I just told you all those people that are around them. All those people who are fighting in Afghanistan are sitting right by our soldiers. Now those guys, they deserve some help because they're 18 years old, they don't know what they're getting into, and at one moment they could all be killed. Right? Those people, you want to give them some back pay, you want to make sure when they get home they're okay, I will pay as many taxes as I need to for those people. But working at Starbucks, not the same deal. But if you want to get me a coffee, that'd be great. Just kidding. Anyway, just kidding. But that's, anyway, thanks for your time today, guys. Appreciate you tuning in on live on Facebook Live. Have a great day.